Early one November evening in 1957 in Wisconsin, police acting on a tip-off about a missing woman called Bernice Worden raided a dilapidated farmhouse belonging to Ed Gein on the outskirts of the small town of Plainfield. They were ill-prepared for the unexpected horrors that they would find. It would lead to one of the most notorious criminal cases in American history. They did find the missing woman. The police sent to Gein's home that night were greeted by the gruesome sight of Worden's headless, gutted body hanging from the ceiling by her ankles. Her head was soon found in a sack, and her heart hanging in a plastic bag. That morning in November the 16th, 58-year-old Plainfield hardware shop owner Bernice Worden had unexpectedly disappeared. The shop's truck was seen being driven from behind the shop at around 9:30 a.m. The store had had few customers over the previous days, which could have been because it was the deer hunting season. Worden's son, Deputy Sheriff Frank Worden, visited his mother around 5 o'clock in the afternoon to find the cash register open and bloodstains on the floor. He told colleagues that on the evening before his mother's disappearance, Gein had been in the shop and was expected to have returned the next morning for a gallon of antifreeze he had ordered. A sales receipt for the product was the last paperwork that had been written by Worden on the morning that she disappeared. That evening, Gein was arrested at a neighbour's house, and the Waushara County Sheriff's Department went to search the farm that he owned. A sheriff's deputy discovered Worden's decapitated body in a shed, hanging upside down by her legs, with a crossbar at her ankles and ropes on her wrists. The torso was suspended like you would a dead deer. She had been shot with a .22 caliber rifle, and the mutilations had been made post-mortem. Edward Gein was born in La Crosse, Wisconsin, on August the 27th, 1906, and was the second of two sons of George Gein and his wife Augusta. Gein's older brother was called Henry. Augusta, who was fervently religious and a strict Lutheran, frequently preached to her sons about the innate immorality of the world, the evil of drinking, and her belief that all women were naturally promiscuous and instruments of the devil. She reserved time every afternoon to read to them from the Bible, usually selecting verses from the Old Testament and the book of Revelation, concerning death, murder, and divine retribution. Gein idolized his mother, and steadily, over the years, became obsessed by her. Keen to protect her family from the evil which she believed lurked around every corner, Augusta insisted that they move from La Crosse, where they owned a grocery and provision store, calling the town a sinkhole of filth, as she described it. They sold up, and the family left the area when they bought a 155-acre farm in the town of Plainfield. Even there, Augusta had the family settle away from the town, since she believed that living in proximity would corrupt her two young sons. Augusta took advantage of the farm's isolation by turning away outsiders who could have influenced her sons. Ed left the farm only to attend school, and when he wasn't there, he spent most of his time doing chores on the farm. As a result, he failed to establish any meaningful connections with his classmates and teachers, who remembered him as socially awkward and prone to odd, unexplained fits of laughter. In addition, his lazy eye and speech impediment made him an easy victim of bullies. Despite all this, Ed adored his mother. His father had died in April 1940 from a heart attack and had cast a much smaller shadow over his life. He absorbed his mother's lessons about the world and seemed to embrace her harsh world view. Though Henry sometimes stood up to Augusta, Ed never did. She punished him whenever he tried to make friends. Despite his poor social development, Gein did fairly well in school, particularly at reading. Ed and his brother Henry began doing odd jobs around town to help cover living expenses. The brothers were generally considered reliable and honest by the rest of the community. While both worked as handymen, Gein also frequently babysat for neighbours. He enjoyed babysitting, seeming to relate more easily to children than adults. Henry began dating a divorced mother of two and planned to move in with her. He worried about his brother's attachment to their mother and often spoke ill of her around Ed, who was known to have been shocked and hurt by this. On May the 16th, 1944, Ed and Henry set out to clear some vegetation in their fields by burning it away. As they worked, the fire suddenly got out of control. When firefighters arrived to put out the blaze, Ed told them that Henry was missing. With lanterns and torches, a search party looked for 43-year-old Henry, whose body was subsequently found lying face down and seemingly dead from asphyxiation. At the time, it seemed like a tragic accident. But accidental or not, Henry's death meant that Ed and Augusta had the farmhouse to themselves. It was later reported that Henry had bruises on his head. Police dismissed the possibility of foul play, and the county coroner later officially listed asphyxiation as the cause of death. The authorities accepted the accident theory, but no official investigation was conducted, and an autopsy was not performed. Was Henry Ed's first murder? Questioning him about the death of Bernice Worden in 1957, state investigator Joe Wilmowski brought up questions about Henry's death. He wrote that, in retrospect, it was possible and likely that Henry's death was the Cain and Abel aspect of the case. Augusta had a stroke not long after her son's death, and Ned devoted himself to taking care of her. Sometime in 1945, he and his mother visited a man named Smith, who lived nearby, to purchase straw. According to Ed, Augusta witnessed Smith beating a dog. A woman inside the Smith residence came outside and yelled for him to stop, but Smith beat the dog to death. Augusta was extremely upset by this, but what bothered her did not appear to be the brutality towards the dog, but rather the presence of the woman. Augusta told Ed that the woman was not married to Smith and had no business being there, and angrily called her Smith's harlot. She had a second stroke soon after, and her health deteriorated rapidly. She died on December the 29th, at the age of 67. Ed was devastated by her death, as he had lost his only friend, and he was absolutely alone in the world. Gein held on to the farm and earned money from odd jobs. Following his mother's death, he transformed the house into something of a shrine to her memory. He boarded up rooms that she'd used, keeping them in pristine condition and untouched, and moved into a small bedroom next to the kitchen. While the rest of the house became increasingly squalid, these rooms remained in good order. Living alone, far from town, and obsessively devoted to his mother, Gein never left home or dated women. After her death, he became increasingly deranged. It was around this time he became interested in anatomy books, reading pulp magazines and horror stories, particularly those involving cannibals or Nazi atrocities, and medical experiments, specifically concerning Ilse Koch, who selected tattooed prisoners for death in order to fashion lampshades and other items from their skins. Gein received a farm subsidy from the federal government and occasionally did agricultural contracting in the Plainfield area. Sometime between 1946 and 1956, he also sold 80 acres of land on the edge of the farm. Everything changed in November 1957, when local hardware store owner Bernice Warden vanished, leaving nothing behind except bloodstains and an empty till. When police went to the farmhouse that evening looking for the missing woman, they walked into a waking nightmare and a house of horrors. Not only did they find the missing woman, Bernice Warden, whom they were looking for, dead, decapitated, and hung from her ankles, but they also found a number of shocking and grisly objects, like face masks, lampshades, seat covers that Gein had crafted using human body parts. Gein's goal, as he later explained to police, was to create a skin suit to quasi-resurrect his dead mother, with whom he had been obsessed for years. There were countless bones, both whole and fragmented, skulls impaled on his bedposts, and bowls and kitchen utensils made from the skulls. Worse than the bones, however, was the household items that Ed had made from human skin. Authorities found chairs upholstered, a wastebasket made of skin, leggings made from human body parts, masks made from faces, a belt made of nipples, a pair of lips being used as a window shade drawstring, a corset made of a female torso, and a lampshade made from a human face. Along with the skin items, police found various dismembered body parts, including fingernails, 4 noses, and the genitals of 9 different women. They also found the remains of Mary Hogan, a bar owner who'd gone missing in 1954. Gein readily admitted when questioned that he collected most of the remains from 3 local graveyards between 1947 and 1952, which he started to visit 2 years after his mother's death. He told police he'd visited the graveyards around 40 times at night, when he was in a daze. He also explained why. On about 30 of those visits, he said that he came out of the daze while in the cemeteries, and always left the graves in good order and returned home empty-handed. On the other occasions, he dug up the graves of recently buried middle-aged women he thought resembled his mother, and took the bodies home, where he tanned their skins to make his paraphernalia. He told authorities that he had wanted to create a woman's suit so that he could become his mother and crawl into her skin. These artifacts were photographed at the State Crime Laboratory and then decently disposed of. Gein admitted from stealing from 9 graves and led investigators to their locations. The State Crime Laboratory participated in opening 3 test graves identified by Gein. The caskets were wooden boxes. The tops of the boxes were about 2 feet below the surface, in sandy soil. Gein had robbed the graves soon after the funerals, while the graves were not fully completed. The digging was done because the authorities were uncertain as to whether Gein was capable of single-handedly digging up a grave during a single evening. They were found as he had described them. One coffin was empty, while another was empty but contained a few bones, and Gein's crowbar. The final coffin saw most of the body missing. Bizarrely, Gein had even returned rings and some of the body parts. It was concluded that his confession was largely corroborated. He denied having sex with the bodies he exhumed, explaining that they smelled too bad. During questioning, he also admitted to shooting 54-year-old Mary Hogan, a bar owner, a place Gein used to frequent, who had been missing since December 1954, whose head was found in his house, but he later denied that he could remember the exact details of her death. During the inquiry, Sheriff Art Schley reportedly assaulted Gein by banging his head and face into a brick wall. As a result, Gein's initial confession was ruled inadmissible. Schley died of heart failure in 1968, at age 43, before Gein's trial. Many who knew Schley said he was traumatized by the horror of Gein's crimes, and this, along with the fear of having to testify, especially about assaulting Gein, caused his death. In addition to the murders of Hogan and Warden, Gein was also suspected of several other unsolved cases in Wisconsin. The police confronted Gein with a list of missing persons cases that had occurred between the death of his mother and Warden. Their suspicions were further aroused after the discovery of Hogan's remains. It turned out that lie detector tests exonerated him of any other murders, and his psychiatrist concluded that his violence was only directed to women who physically resembled his mother. On November the 21st, 1957, Gein was charged with one count of first-degree murder in Moshara County Court, where he pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity. He was diagnosed with schizophrenia and found mentally incompetent, thus unfit for trial. He was sent to the Central State Hospital for the Criminally Insane, a maximum security facility, and later transferred to the Mendota State Hospital in Madison. In early 1968, doctors determined Gein was mentally able to confer with his lawyer and participate in his defense. The trial began on November the 7th and lasted 1 week. A psychiatrist testified that Gein had told him that he did not know whether the killing of Warden was intentional or accidental. Gein had told him that while he examined a gun in Warden's store, the weapon discharged and killed her. He said he had not aimed it at Warden, and that he did not remember anything else that happened that morning. At the request of the defense, Gein's trial was held without a jury, with Judge Robert Golmer presiding. Gein was found guilty by Golmer on November the 14th. A second trial dealt with Gein's sanity, and after testimony by doctors for the prosecution and defense, the judge ruled Gein guilty by reason of insanity and ordered him committed to the Central State Hospital for the criminally insane. He spent the rest of his life in a mental hospital. Judge Golmer wrote, "Due to uncertain evidence, the costs and the mental state of the accused, Gein was tried for only one murder, that of Mrs. Warden. He also admitted to killing Mary Hogan. Both murders had been committed because both women resembled his late mother. But that raises a chilling question. How many people did Ed Gein kill? Until his death in 1984 at the age of 77, he only ever admitted to murdering Warden and Hogan. The other bodies, and police found as many as 40 in his home, he claimed he'd robbed from graves. Save for his attempt to petition for release in 1974, which was rejected, the mild-mannered Gein made virtually no news while institutionalized. Gein's house, the outbuildings and land were valued at $4,700. His possessions were set to be auctioned on March the 30th, 1958, amidst rumours that the house and land it stood on might become a tourist attraction. Early on the morning of March the 20th, the house was destroyed by fire. Arson was suspected, but the cause of the fire was never officially discovered. It is possible that it was not considered a matter of urgency to Sheriff's Deputy Frank Warden, son of Gein's victim, Bernice Warden. When Gein learned of the incident while in detention, he shrugged and said, "Just as well." His Ford car, which he used to transport the bodies of his victims, was sold at public auction for $760 to carnival sideshow operator Bunny Gibbons. Gibbons charged carnival goers 25 cents admission to see it. Gein died at the Mendoza Mental Health Institute due to respiratory failure, secondary to lung cancer, on July 26, 1984, at the age of 77. Over the years, souvenir seekers chipped away pieces from his gravestone at Plainfield Cemetery, which had become something of a tourist attraction, until it was stolen in June 2000. Police initially thought that occult groups could have been behind the theft. It was recovered in June the following year, near Seattle, and was put in storage at the Rosara County Sheriff's Department. Gein is buried between his parents and brother in Plainfield Cemetery. His gravesite now unmarked, but certainly not unknown.